Happy Tuesday, Pro-Life family. Today we are talking to Jen Hamann. She has an amazing story of surviving an unbelievable series of events. Grab your coffee and maybe some tissues. Pull up a chair. Let's get started. Happy Tuesday, Pro-Life family. Grab your coffee, pull up a chair. So let me introduce the amazing people around the table. Veronica Arnold Smither, Education Associate. Emily Cook, General Counsel, Requirement IT Director. And our guest today, Jenny Hamann, amazing survivor person who has quite a story. My goodness. I have heard of the story. I have not heard the story in person. We have heard of you. Veronica talks about you and your case all the time, and it's been like, we need to have her on the podcast. We need to have her on the podcast. Well, episode 30, we're finally doing this. Woo-hoo. Nice. So you survived locked-in syndrome and some really ugly circumstances around that.
Yes.
First, I guess let's establish, what is locked-in syndrome?
Truth be told, I didn't know what it was. I did not even hear that term, locked-in syndrome, until years after this happened. Okay. So locked-in syndrome basically is when a person is in a comatose state, they're non-responsive, yet they can hear. They can understand what's going on around them. They have cognition, so cognitively they are there. Okay. However, they're unable to make their presence known.
It's like you're paralyzed from the inside.
Yes.
So you know what is going on and you completely understand what's happening around you, but your brain cannot make the rest of your body externally show that.
Right.
So internally, all senses working, still all there. Mm-hmm. Externally,
right.
sleeping.
I was unable to open my eyes. I was unable to speak. I was unable to even change my breathing pattern. But I could hear and I understood. And I even began, while locked in, I even began to recognize people by the way they walked, the way they moved.
Great.
I could hear the pattern of their footsteps, and it's like, oh, it's this one. And I assigned names to people who did not introduce themselves to me.
So how old were you when this happened, and why did this happen? How did you come to be in a coma?
Okay, I was 25. I had a life history of epilepsy, only it kind of took an ugly turn in my mid-20s, and that's when it was finally diagnosed. I had kind of a hidden epilepsy all my life. Those little absent seizure type things. But when the seizures evolved in my mid-20s, that's when I actually sought medical help and was evaluated for it, and they discovered that, yes, indeed, I was having seizures. The seizures came under control. When I was told, when the doctor did all the tests and everything, he says, well, I have some good news, some bad news, and some good news. He said, the good news is you're not having many strokes. Because that's what I was thinking it was. Mm. We had a family history of stroke. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm having these little mini strokes, because I would be left paralyzed on one side with a droop on my face on that side.
That's so scary.
And
wow.
And it was like, and that would last for maybe 15, 20 minutes after the episode, And so he said, it's not mini strokes. They're not TIAs. The bad news is you have epilepsy. We actually captured a seizure on the EEG, and it was very clear to us that this is a seizure. And he showed me the brainwave patterns, and it was like, wow. So the other good news, so it was good news, bad news. Now the other good news is we can treat it. We can control seizures. We can give you medication, get the seizures under control, and you can live a very normal, healthy life. Mm-hmm. So that's what we did. I started on Dilantin and phenobarbital. Those were like the main ones back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. So I gave myself away, didn't I?
Well, we won't tell.
Okay, so tell us tell us about the episode that landed you into this locked-in syndrome state, and then how long did it take for you to kind of come to and realize what was going on?
Okay. I had made the decision, even though I had some college education and whatnot, I decided that I wanted to stay home with my children until they were of school age. Mm-hmm. So I did daycare. And one of my daycare children, the family had gone to Guatemala. And when they came back, he had diarrhea. And I wasn't a nurse at that time, but I still knew you wash your hands, right? It's like, yes. You're changing a diaper, you wash your hands. Well, no matter how careful I was, I ended up with diarrhea.
Okay.
And so I think the kid was putting his own hands in his diaper, so whatever.
Kids
really
are
gross.
Pretty nasty sometimes.
Gross, right?
We're our parents, yes. Yeah.
So I went to the doctor, gave them a specimen, and a couple days later I get a phone call. And it's not my doctor, but an on-call doctor. And he said, we got the test results and you have giardiasis. Giardia is a kind of a parasitic infection in the gut. Ooh. And he said, so it's very simply treated. I'm going to prescribe some Flagyl. So generic name for Flagyl is metronidazole. Okay. I had never heard of it. And I just said, okay, doctor, well, just needing you to know, because you're not my regular doctor, whatever you prescribe, it has to be okay with my Dilantin and phenobarbital that I take for seizure control. And he said, oh, sure, this is a very benign medication, no problem. I'm like, okay. So I had my 2 children plus 8 daycare children. So I called my neighbor and she went and picked up the prescription for me. Because there was there's no way I was taking 10 kids to the pharmacy.
No.
So I took my first dose of medication as soon as I got it because it was going to be a twice a day. And it was the strangest thing. I all of a sudden, it's like I'm looking at the ceiling. I'm laying on the kitchen floor, and the children are all around me just crying. Oh, my God. And these are all like preschool and younger.
Oh, my gosh.
And I turned to one of the older children, a 4-year-old, and I said, what happened? And they said, well, you just kind of got all stiff and you fell down and then you flopped around like a fish. Oof. And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds like a grand mal seizure. And now, even though I had epilepsy, I had never had a grand mal seizure. I'd had the petit mal, the partial complex type, the little absence seizures. I'd never had a grand mal seizure. That was a first. So I thought, okay, the only thing different is I took that medicine. I called the doctor's office, and I spoke with someone who put me on hold and went and talked with the doctor and came back. And she said, well, doctor says he doesn't think the medication is what caused the seizure. He thinks because you've had diarrhea, your regular seizure control medications are being flushed out of your system too fast. And so your therapeutic levels of those medications has dropped, and you're having rebound seizures that can actually be worse than your regular seizures. I thought, okay, they're a good medical explanation, and they said, just you need to continue taking the Flagyl to get the diarrhea under control, so then your seizures will come back under control. Okay. So that evening, that night, I took my second dose. And I had my second grand mal seizure, followed by a third.
Oh my goodness.
And a fourth. And then my husband helped me to bed. And the next thing I knew, in the morning, he said, Sue's going to come over and stay with you and the kids. All the daycare kids are going to other places. We've taken care of it all. You just take it easy today. I could hear him.
Oh my gosh.
But I couldn't answer him. I opened my eyes, though. At that point, I was still able to open my eyes. I opened my eyes, and I was looking at him, and I was not able to move or speak. And I could feel tears coming, streaming down the sides of my face. And he just was like, oh my, what's happening? So he called 911, and I was taken via ambulance to an emergency room.
Wow.
This is in Robbinsdale, Minnesota. Okay. The next memory I have was in the ER. And I remember my husband saying, honey, I'm really exhausted and I'm hungry. I'm going to go down to the cafeteria and get something to eat, and I'll be back. And I heard him telling a nurse to, please watch over her while I'm away. And then he was gone. And I'll tell you, there's something, by that time, I had been in continuous seizure for approximately 10 hours.
Oh my
and
gosh.
they had been unable to get the seizures under control.
What does
And
that
there
mean
are-
medically, to be in continuous seizure?
It's called status epilepticus. All right. And it could be continuous or repeated seizures is status epilepticus. And they estimate that I had been in continuous seizure pattern for about 10 hours. 1 minute of seizure, mind you, takes about 4 hours to recover from. All right. You have a 1 minute seizure, 1 minute or less. If you go more than a minute, that's considered a pretty long seizure. If you go 3 minutes, it's considered life-threatening. So if you ever see someone seizing and the seizure is going on for more than 3 minutes, that's a 911. This is life-threatening now. 10 hours. So I was profoundly exhausted. Okay? Truly, I can't even, there's no describing the level of exhaustion.
Wow.
And it was the strangest thing. I've heard of out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, and I've heard people describe, a light at the end of a tunnel. There was no tunnel. What it was like I was hovering above myself, and I could see myself on the bed. And I saw a nurse come in, check me, then run out, then run back in. And a bunch of other people followed her in, and they started working on me, trying to revive me.
Wow.
And in the meantime, it's like there was no ceiling or anything, because I kept getting further and further away. It was like that was becoming more and more distant, but I could still see myself.
Wow.
Then all of a sudden, I just couldn't see myself anymore. And I was just in a place that, it's like the place was light. The place I was in was light. I don't know how else to describe it. I was in the light, and the light was in me. And I said, Lord, if you want me, I'm ready. And I literally heard his voice say, I have much more for you to do.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then I felt a shock. That was very painful.
Boom.
And I was back in my body.
Wow.
I don't know why we don't keep Kleenexes on this table.
Yes, again, out of reach.
Oh.
Sorry, friend.
Oh, man.
Thank you. Okay, so you're back.
Well, no,
And what
okay,
happened?
Jesus told me, I believe this is Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic Christian, and I had no question who that was that told me I have much more for you to do, right? I'll tell you, ever since 1985, every day I ask the Lord, what? What is it you've got for me to do?
What's that?
So ever since then, I've been just seeking what that is. And I take it as it comes, and I look for opportunities. Well, all right. I understand I coded a second time, but I have no actual memory of the second code. So I'm told that I coded twice.
Wow.
My next memory is in the ICU. And I could hear a nurse, a voice of a nurse come in, and she was talking to me. She said, hi, I'm Nancy. I'm here to take care of you. I'm going to be cleaning you up. I'm giving you a tube feeding. They had an NG tube, a nasal gastric tube. That's a tube that goes through the nose and down to the stomach to feed. It's a feeding tube. And they had me on an external pacemaker because my heart kept stopping.
Okay.
And so they had an external pacer that every time my heart would stop, it would shock and restart it. So
Thank goodness for modern medicine when you need it.
I know. So anyway, and they had me on a respirator because I wasn't breathing on my own. So this nurse, she was very sweet. She would tell me what the weather was like. She would tell me who had been in to visit, that sort of thing. She would talk to me.
And you were still, of course, completely unable
I
to
was
respond.
not able to respond.
Yeah.
I could hear her, and I, it was really nice for her to be telling me what she's doing, what's going on, and but I couldn't open my eyes and look at her. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't do anything.
And they didn't know that you could hear them.
No, they didn't know.
And I think that's what families, their worst nightmare is, or that's what they want to know. They interact with their loved one just in case that the person knows and can hear what they're doing. And I in our experience, and that nurse seems to have been to be very kind, and even in the medical community they try to don't talk. Families get mad when they talk about the condition of the patient or dire circumstances in front of the patient, acting like the patient can't hear. And the reality is you just don't know.
You don't know.
Nobody
knows. Now, I'll tell you the truth. I had awake and asleep times. Even while I was unconscious, I had awake and asleep times. I had times when I was not aware of what's going on. Just like when you go to sleep, you don't know what's going on around you. But I had awake times, and I was fully alert and aware of what's going on around me, just unable to respond, unable to say anything or give any indication that, hey, I'm here. There were other nurses. I had some good nurses, and I had some not so good nurses. There were some nurses who I never heard their voice. They never spoke. They came in, they did what they did. I could kind of tell that they were rough. I didn't feel any pain or anything, but I could tell that by the way they, like they would just jerk or move or whatever, and they never talked to me. And I came to recognize different people by the sound of their footsteps, by how they walked, how they moved. I could it's like, oh, it's that one. It's like, oh. And it's like, well, one day, this one came in that I never really looked forward to, this one coming in, but I actually heard her voice for the first time. But it's what she said. She says, hey, could somebody come in here and help me turn this thing? Oh my God. She was talking about me.
Yeah.
Me.
That's horrible.
She called me this thing. Okay, so do you know, I really truly believe all things work to the good, right? Good comes out of bad all the time. That was a defining moment in my life.
Wow.
That was the moment while I was in a coma, unresponsive. I made the decision to become a nurse.
Wow.
That's
See,
amazing.
God said,
I am going to go to
work for
school
you.
and I'm going to be a nurse, and dang it, I'm going to be one of the good ones.
Yes.
Wow. So your
awesome.
journey, how long were you in this state of not being able to externally respond?
A few weeks. Yeah, about 3 weeks. During that time, okay, so there's several memories I have during that time. I know a doctor would come in and he'd test for reflexes and do whatever, and it's like, okay, no change,
Any idea if they had done brain scans?
Well, I know they had done EEG, and I don't know if they'd done any scans.
Okay.
I don't know.
But
But I
obviously
know
things have developed so much over the past few decades too in technology. But I'm just curious
Right.
if they had ever said anything like there's no brain activity or limited brain activity.
Okay.
Or...
So they did. They did say something. There was one time I heard multiple footsteps come into the room. And there was one adult male voice. It says, oh, this one's a sad case. Young woman, mother, 2 small kids at home, 2 small children, and her husband, though, is being completely unreasonable.
Oh my gosh.
Well, let me interrupt. We need to take a break. We can come back and talk about what he's being unreasonable about.
Okay.
In just a second.
Nice cliffhanger.
In just a moment.
Save the date for Boots on the Ground. It's an awesome pro-life conference coming up January 28th and 29th. Come to Austin, Texas with us to march to the Capitol to celebrate the end of Roe v. Wade, to commemorate Roe v. Wade, and to learn from expert pro-life speakers on how to keep Texas pro-life forever. Come to Austin with us and hear from Ryan Baumberger, our keynote speaker who shares his personal story, and so much more. Book your tickets today, bootsonthegroundtx.com. See you in January.
Welcome back, friends. We are continuing our story with Jenny Hamann. Now, this situation just, other than sounding like nightmare fuel, but we interrupted where the doctor was saying your husband was being difficult about something. Unreasonable. That was the word.
Completely unreasonable.
Completely unreasonable.
Completely unreasonable.
So what did this doctor think your husband was so unreasonable?
You can imagine my ears perked up. I'm listening. What is he being completely unreasonable about? And he says, other than the fact that she's brain dead. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
Hold up.
Other than the fact that she's brain dead, she is in excellent physical condition, and many people could benefit from her organs.
Oh, wow. That's triggering.
And I'm like, whoa. You can't have my organs. I
am still using these. Thank you. Oh, my gosh.
I need my organs. And it's like, no, he wanted my organs.
Wow.
And he had conveniently diagnosed me as brain dead. Now, one of the other voices in the room came out at that time and said, Doctor, is it appropriate to talk like this in front of the patient?
Exactly.
And I'm thinking, no, it's absolutely not. But the doctor says, hello, I said she's brain dead. She can't hear anything. She'll never be anything more than a vegetable.
Oh, that's so calloused.
Yeah. And you know what, for anyone listening, so because your husband was fighting for the mother of his children.
Yes.
And saying, hey, let's give my 25-year-old wife more than 3 weeks before we start discussing this. He was completely unreasonable.
Completely unreasonable.
And that's what you're going to encounter. That's just real. It's not just from this one physician. It's not an isolated incident. And so if you have a loved one who is going through in different stages of coma or a brain injury, like, you are going to have to fight for them. And you are going to be deemed unreasonable. Mm-hmm. But you know what? Sometimes 2 little kids get their mom back.
Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't have to be considered this miraculous event that you survived. It could just be that a lot of different patients just need more time and need someone to vouch for them instead of just automatically writing them off.
Well, think about it. Okay, I told you that a 1-minute seizure takes 4 hours to recover. I had a 10-hour seizure. Gosh. We're talking 100 days to recover.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time.
100 days it would have taken
3.5 months
to recover.
And your husband had the right. It's so easy. One of our paralegal and patient advocates here, Miranda, she calls it emotional blackmailing. That doctor, by trying to talk about your being a healthy 25-year-old and how much good you could do for other people, trying to emotionally blackmail your husband into signing off on organ donation. No. You know what the most important thing is for him? You. Mm-hmm. That not taking into all these other, it's not to be harsh, but it isn't. What is most important is the mother of my children, not all, I'm sorry, all these other 10 other people who might get her organs. It's not. So don't let them.
Emily's got a little bit of a soapbox on this one.
Sorry.
Well, you have to deal with this on almost a daily basis. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get your soapbox. So when did you start? When did someone first realize that you were aware? How did that happen?
Okay, so first things first. What happens is when a patient is brain dead. There are, even back in 85, there were certain things that they would do to verify that somebody's brain dead. And one of those things is called an apnea test.
They still do that
They
today.
still do.
It's
Okay.
horrible. It's the worst test in the world.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, you remember the old witch trials in the
Yes.
old days?
Salem witch
Okay,
trials,
so,
Yes.
so here we
If you
have
drown your...
we have
This
a
is a good
woman.
example.
We're going to bind her up and throw her fully clothed. Now, the women in those days wore long dresses that would be filled with water, and it would sink them to the bottom of the whatever. If they sink, then she wasn't a witch, but
Womp
she's
womp.
dead. So, oh well.
Sad. Oops.
But if she floats, oh, she must be a witch, so let's burn her at the stake.
That's the
So
best
the woman
analogy.
is dead either way, right? Well, this is what the apnea test does. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, okay, if the person doesn't breathe within a certain period of time, we're going to give them 3 minutes without the respirator and without them taking a breath, and that proves they're brain dead. Well, 3 minutes without taking a breath is going to cause serious brain damage,
Yeah.
right? So if my brain is just in recovery mode and just trying to rest and get over all the hours of seizure, well, and mind you, how do you stop a seizure? There are drugs that they give that are that's with an N, neurosuppressants. These
That
are
makes
drugs
sense.
that will suppress brain waves. Okay,
So it's natural that your
brain
body's going to be slower.
So
to
they were giving
respond.
me heavy doses of neurosuppressants to suppress brainwave activity, and then said I have a lack of brainwave activity, so I must be brain dead.
What a mess.
Science.
It's science, right? So
She's a witch.
yeah, she's a witch. Burn her at the stake. So they did an apnea test on me.
They
All right.
removed the ventilator.
Okay.
And
the respirator.
when you've been on a respirator for a while,
don't.
you literally forget how to breathe for
Yeah,
yourself.
that's why it's called weaning.
Yeah, you have to
They have to
the
wean,
patient.
right? You have to wean someone off of the respirator. But the apnea test doesn't do a
Correct.
weaning process. It's a stop the respirator cold turkey and see if they breathe on their own. And we're going to give her 3 minutes of trying to see if she'll start to take a breath. 3 minutes, long enough to ensure I'm brain damaged, but not long enough to just damage other vital organs.
So they can have those organs.
They could still use those organs, right?
People think we're conspiracy theorists, but this
Science,
is
you guys.
this
This
the
is real.
most common test used today.
And because then it's just when we're in a medical situation and we're trying to make decisions on our families, what makes us feel better? When the doctors come and say, oh, we ran this test, and it also says X, Y, Z. But we don't stop to think, actually, are those tests good tests? Are those effective? What's behind the curtain here? And it's, again, another way of emotionally blackmailing families to sign off on life-ending decisions because to make them feel more confident. Well, the doctors say they ran all these tests and it's all bad. Well, the tests may be bad.
Right.
That's a reality you just don't want to have to
So
consider.
it's 2022. I was told we'd have
Sorry.
flying cars by now, but yet our leading test to see if somebody's brain dead is let's suffocate them
To
and see what happens.
And see if they live.
And see if they live or
But
not.
amazingly, you breathed.
So, well, yes, fortunately.
Thank
And I
God.
don't believe this was an accident at all. This is a God thing, right? Nancy, my favorite nurse, was in the room when they did the apnea test, right? So was the organ procurement doctor.
Oh wow.
The organ,
Wow.
the organ
At all.
team doctor, right?
Okay.
So
Makes my
anyway,
heart jump.
so Nancy's there, and I hear her saying, "You have to breathe. You've got to take a breath. One breath. That's all you need to do. Take a breath. Come on, you can do it. You can."
Wow.
Just encouraging me, and I was like, "I've got to take a breath.
Oh, that's so
I
amazing.
can't remember how. How do you take? Okay, wait a minute.
That's amazing. Imagine if she hadn't been there.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
It reminds
And
me.
then I hear a male voice.
She's a witch. No.
So you've got an angel on one side and a devil on the other. Okay. Good Lord.
That's amazing. Oh, I love every time I hear you tell this part of the story. There's so many moments in your story that really get me, but this one, I just remember when I've had moments in my life where I needed a coach. Now I'm going to get all emotional, but like, for instance, giving birth. Like, there are moments when you just forget how to push, right? This is a really big deal, and you've got your team around you, like, yelling, helping you, like, guiding you, and it's so amazing. Yeah, breathe, do this, do that, relax your neck, push, you can do it. Like, this is so important. And there are other times where, like, my friend, I used to run, not anymore. I used to run 5Ks every now and then, and my friend, she'd be like, what's your average time? And you're like, 45 minutes. I'm not trying to be cool. And she's like, I'll get you under 30. And she yelled at me nonstop the entire 5K, and we got 29 minutes. And I was dead afterward, but it was amazing, and I felt so great because my friend was coaching me through the 5K. She's a great runner. She was yelling at me the entire time and helping me.
Yeah.
And, like, Nancy was there helping you.
That's right.
I always think back, like, the times when we need that help. We need someone to coach us through and motivate us and push us. And what if she hadn't been there? He would have just swooped right in.
Yeah. And so Nancy's great. Let's talk about that doctor and his reaction. Right?
There's the good and the bad.
Yes, let's
instead of being joyful that
good, she's not dead.
This mom of two kids might actually be something we can do for her. Okay, his reaction says one of two things. Either he's really mad that they're not getting your organs, okay? Or he's not humble enough to recognize, I made a mistake, and it's actually a good mistake because this woman gets to live.
How about both?
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Both?
You're right.
Yes. It's not either or.
Yeah, you're right.
I think it's both. There's a great deal of arrogance in being able to say that this person deserves to every opportunity to live and this person does not. We're gonna just harvest this one.
So people often ask me all the time, what drives these decisions by medical professionals? Is it money? Is it discrimination based on a disability? Or is it quality of life judgments? But I always go back to, it's a mix of both, but really at the heart of it is the arrogance. I know, I can tell you what is this person's life is or is not worth living, and no one is going to prove me wrong.
That's really sad. I don't know how it gets to that point because so many healthcare professionals go in because of a sense of altruism or, wanting to serve people, or perhaps they're fascinated with just medicine and the science itself. But at what point do they become like calloused and jaded and no longer care for the person in front of them? And maybe it's a slow slide downhill. Maybe it was something there underlying all along, even when they were in med school or nursing school or whatever it may be. But it's terrifying to think that, like, any of us are capable of becoming that evil. And like, we have to guard ourselves against becoming these horrible people. Yeah, it's like, how do we stay Nancy? How do we be the Nancy?
Well, so we have a med student graduate fellowship program at TXRTL Live, and we had a couple of them in our office last week, and our patient advocacy team was giving them kind of a little training, and their question was, how do I be a good pro-life physician? And one of the key points is you got to be countercultural. Like, you're in your second year of med school, you're already being exposed to this just how you're being taught, you're being trained to, it makes you feel uneasy, but there's so much pressure on you to conform and not ask questions. And this is like that, you've got to be countercultural both in school and then in your practices. And they're both like, administration's going to be, it's really hard, but that is the state of our medicine. We are not a process oriented, we are results oriented. And by gosh, if the result isn't, we saw this in the Tinsley case, the doctors, if they thought reality was going to be one way and they were going to do everything they possibly could to make it that way.
Mm-hmm. And they were wrong. She's still alive. She's doing great. So,
anyways,
oh my gosh.
Back to Jenny's story. Sorry.
Your story is such a great story all by itself, but it also provides an amazing opportunity to teach so many people about the way the system is good and bad, and right now it's mostly bad. So, so thank you for letting us interrupt you so much.
So after you pass the apnea test, what happened next?
Yes.
Okay, so then they decided, okay, I guess we'll do a proper weaning on the respirator, and they did.
Wow.
They did properly wean me off the
That's
respirator.
wonderful. How long did that take? Do you
Took
remember?
a couple days.
Yeah.
Took a couple days.
That's it.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's
Wait,
funny.
this isn't months of weaning. This is a couple
No,
days.
no, a couple days.
Beg hospitals to do this sometimes, and they act like it's this unheard of phenomenon. Why would we wean someone? Like you said, just a couple days.
Just
like,
a couple
why
days.
is that so scary?
Retrain them to breathe on their own, because we have gotten out of the habit of breathing on our own. We've allowed a machine to breathe for us, and so
your brain can literally rest.
Your
'cause it
brain
needed
can
to
literally rest, right? So now it's retraining me to breathe on my own, and making sure that the breathing is consistent, because you don't want to have apneic episodes, you know. So
Like sleep apnea. That's where that
Right.
comes from.
Right.
Normal people can understand that. That's what we're talking about.
apnea means no breathing.
Right.
Apnea test. No breathing. But anyways.
Anyway, so then it was the doctor. Remember, I told you a doctor came in on a regular basis to test reflexes, and it was not the same doctor as the organ doctor. Okay, so I think the doctor who came in with the group was the organ procurement doctor, and he had a group with him, and he was, I don't know, maybe doing grand rounds or I don't know what. But, you know, my doctor, I never heard that doctor again. That doctor never came back. Okay. So once he'd lost his goal, it's like he had no reason to come back. But,
Sad, but funny.
So the next thing was my foot responded when they ran the sharp instrument up the bottom of my foot, and my foot responded and reacted. And Nancy was there. She says, "Did you see that? Did you see that, doctor? Her foot moved. Try the other one." The other foot moved too. "Oh my gosh, she's coming back." He says, "Yeah." And the doctor said, "Yeah, I think she's on her way back."
That's wonderful.
And a day, maybe the next day or something, I heard Nancy coming in again. And the desire to see Nancy
Oh, I bet so.
was just overwhelming. I just really wanted to see her. This woman had saved my
made me cry
life.
now.
I am crying.
So I wanted to see Nancy.
You good?
So I did. I opened my eyes.
Oh, that's
Amazing.
amazing.
And she noticed. And she said, "Well, hello there. Welcome back." She says, "Can you talk?"
Nice
Okay, well, maybe it's too soon for that. she says, "Can you blink your eyes?" And she said, "Okay, so it's going to be once. One blink means yes. Two blinks means no." I'm like, she said, "Do you understand?" And I blinked once. She's like, "Okay."
Oh, that's so cool.
So using
They make movies about this stuff.
Right?
Was it like Little Man Tate or whatever?
So using simple yes/no questions, she was able to determine that I knew my name. You know, she asked me a bunch of other names that weren't mine. And it was always no, yes, you got it this time. She was like, and then, "Are you married?" I knew the answer to that. "How many children do you have?" "Oh, I'm sorry, that's a number. Just blink how many children you have." And I looked at her and I thought, okay, this is a hard one, because I have 2 children, and I have 2 foster children, and I have 6 more daycare children.
Oh, wow.
And I said, so the daycare children I don't count as my children, but the foster children, should I count that? And so I was like, she's like, "Oh, that's right. I heard about you." And she says, "How many natural children do you have?"
Oh, that's so sweet.
So then I blinked 2, and she goes, "Okay, that's good."
Oh my God.
It's just all the pro-life elements wrapped in there.
So
Wow.
all of this, just with yes and no questions, she was able to determine that not only was I awake, not only was I responsive, I was cognizant, and I knew, I understood
Right.
Okay, I was rational.
Right.
So, unfortunately, when I got to that point, that meant that I didn't need to be in ICU, so I had to say goodbye to Nancy. Nancy was so dear. And they transferred me to a regular unit. However, by that time, now mind you, I was still there maybe another day because Nancy gave me my first spoonful of food.
Oh, that's so cool.
And after I was awake and responsive and they were able to determine things, they told me to try swallowing, try this, try that. And they still had the NG tube and they were feeding me through the NG tube. Not enough, mind you. I went into the hospital weighing about 118 pounds. And by the time I transferred out of ICU into the regular unit, I was down to 94.
What?
Yeah, the thing is, they don't need, when the goal is not rehabilitation.
Correct. Right.
The goal is organ procurement, okay?
Yeah.
They only give you enough to keep the organs functioning. They don't give you enough to thrive and recover.
And it's this cyclical point when the goal is this patient's not coming out, this patient's not recovering. When that is not the goal, it's not that the treatment just isn't working. They change how you're being treated.
Right.
And when people, especially with the 10-day, like with the 10-day law in Texas, and they'll say, well, we're doing all this. No, you're not. You're not treating that person when there's a definite end, when you know that you're no longer, the patient will die at this point in time. You're no longer treating that person as someone else. You're not doing, it's not equal because you know there's an out. That's not the goal. And it changes how you interface with the patient, what treatments you provide, how much you feed them.
Yeah.
And as a healthcare professional, that's something we are taught. Our care plans, okay, so the plan of care that we do as nurses, it's goal oriented. Okay, what is the goal?
Correct.
You have to set the goal. And, I hate to think of how the nurses set up a care plan for me, when the goal was to procure my organs,
Yeah.
The goal is to kill this patient. You never see that on a death certificate. If they had procured my organs,
That's how you would
what
die.
do you think they would have put brain death as the cause of death? They would have said status epilepticus, brain death.
Not.
Okay.
She
They would
starved,
not have
we
put
suffocated her.
death
Right.
by organ harvesting.
Yeah.
That's not on. You will never see. I challenge
No, you won't.
to find a single death certificate in the entire world that says death by organ
No,
procurement.
because they claim that
The patient's
people
already
die
dead. It's a legal
in
fiction.
advance.
Brain death is legal fiction.
Right.
What?
I don't know for sure. I do think there may be legitimate situations of brain death. However, we also know that brain death means you have no brain activity, including brain stem, the lower part of the brain.
Right.
And if there's brain stem activity, then the heart keeps beating, the lungs can breathe. A person cannot take a single breath, not one breath can be taken if a person is truly brain dead. The heart, I learned this when I was studying to become a nurse, right? We had, in an anatomy and physiology class, we had a sheep that we actually killed the sheep.
Wow.
And then
Usually they just give you the heart and say, dissect this.
it. No, because we part of it was we actually separated cells from the heart, right? And we could see them under an electron microscope. They had it on a big screen, and the instructor was doing it. We weren't doing it, but he separated. He said, "Now look, the little heart cells are little muscle cells, right? And they have these little feelers that go out and contact the other heart cells, right? And so you had." In this little petri dish, you had these heart cells, and each cell was just beating away. They're just beating away. They're not even in the animal anymore. They're just a cell all by itself is beating away. But as soon as a cell would contact another cell, they'd sync their beat. They'd beat in synchrony.
Wow.
And then if a third cell happened to bump up, they'd all be beating at the same
That's so cool.
synchrony.
Wow.
So here's the thing. The heart can beat on its own for a period of time.
Yeah.
Different estimates. Some have said it could be as much as 72 hours. Some say it could go as long as a week. But I've never heard any expert say that the heart could keep beating in true brain stem death for more than a week. So when you hear cases about, oh, this person has been brain dead for 3 months.
They're not.
They're not. They're in a coma. If they were brain dead, their heart would have stopped long ago.
Yeah.
What was it? What was your husband's experience like during this?
Well, I did hear him a couple of times. He came in and visited with me too, and he may have come in more than a couple times, and I just didn't hear him. Mm-hmm. I told you I had awake and asleep times, but I heard him, encouraging me, honey, you've really got to get well. You've got to get better because you need to come home. The children need you. I need you. I can't raise these kids without you. We all need you. So you've got to just make up your mind to get over this. And it's like, okay, I'll do my best.
What was going on outside your room? Like, what was his? Did you have friends or family pressuring him, or did he have a lot of support?
As a matter of fact, my parents were kind of upset with him because he did not even tell them that I was in the hospital until they were ready to release me home.
Whoa. They
did not know that my life was on the line.
Oh, wow.
They had no idea.
Families, man.
So it's like, they were really upset with him. They were in Texas.
Did you see your medical records after you were released from the hospital and kind of look through everything?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Well, I got a bill.
Oh. That's one way to say it.
Now we belong to an HMO, right? So our insurance was HMO insurance, right? And we get this bill saying you had exceeded the maximum coverage, and so you owe us, it was close to $500,000, right? This is 1985. It's like $500,000. We'll never be able to pay that off.
We do need to take a quick break here, so we will come back with more story. Oh my gosh, this just continues to stay intense. So we'll be back in just a moment.
The Supreme Court just overturned Roe v. Wade. This is a historic moment. Now we have a bold, groundbreaking agenda for the next steps. First, we have to enforce our laws and make sure liberal district attorneys don't give abortionists a free pass. Second, we need to expand the life-saving alternatives to abortion program. And third, we need to save hospital patients. Do you believe in this vision? Go to texasrighttolife.com/stand to donate now and save lives.
Okay, let's pick up where we left off. Veronica, you were asking about medical records, and then you said you have an enormous medical bill.
Yeah. It was overwhelming. I didn't know. It was like, there's no way we can ever pay this off. So back then, we didn't have the internet. So I went to the library and I started doing research. And I wanted to know, okay, I was convinced it was the flagell, right? So I researched the metronidazole as the generic name, and then listed under symptoms what might happen if you give this medication to someone with a central nervous system disorder. Seizure, status epilepticus, cardiopulmonary arrest, coma, paralysis, because even after I regained consciousness, I was still paralyzed. I still had to regain the movement of my body.
And you're just reading this list.
And so even after I opened my eyes, it's like paralysis.
My gosh.
And it's like,
I mean, okay, to a physician, checking the physician's desk reference is akin to a lawyer checking to see if a statute's still effective. I mean, it's like the first thing you would ever do.
Right.
The most easiest thing.
Right.
Basic.
So again, we didn't have internet, we didn't have email, so I took photocopy of it, right, of the physician's desk reference, take that big giant book over to the copier, copy the... We're old school, no taking a picture with your phone.
I miss those days.
Similar times in some ways, but anyways.
And I wrote a letter to the HMO, and I said, listen, it was your doctor who, knowing I had epilepsy and was being treated for it, prescribed a medication that's contraindicated, and I had highlighted all the exactly what happened. And everything that happened to me is what it says could happen to someone who has a central nervous system disorder that takes this medication. And I said, so I'll make you a deal. I won't sue you. And I won't sue the doctor because I realize people are human beings and they make mistakes, even doctors.
That's
You're so gracious.
However, I expect you to erase my bill. And they did.
I'm sure
I bet they did.
Wow.
So
They got off cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know,
That's amazing.
I do know people make mistakes. And people are human.
Yeah.
We all are. Even those who have a God complex really are still human, even though they don't realize it. So, yes.
Did you ever get to thank Nancy or meet her?
No, I never did.
Oh, what a shame.
No, I
I
never
hope
did.
I hope she knows.
She knows.
Yeah.
She knows.
Maybe she'll stumble across this
amazing.
video one day.
Oh, wouldn't
Yeah.
that be great?
Jenny, thank you so much. Oh
You're
my
welcome.
gosh.
You're
Now
welcome.
that Veronica's talked to you up for years, now we get to meet you and hear your story in person. I love this. We have it recorded. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh
Thanks so
my
much for coming in
gosh.
today. It's awesome.
You're
And
welcome.
we're gonna invite you back, what is it, 2 or 3 times a year every single year. So keep
Absolutely.
going for our students.
All right.
Wonderful.
Friends, if you feel so moved, if you want to visit our donate page, you can select the patient advocacy option and send your money there so you can help people in the situations similar to Jenny's. So until next week, friends, I should have warned you to watch this with Kleenex. Next time, I'll be more careful. Thank you. We love you. Change hearts and minds out there. Stand up and say something. Share this video with your friends. Have those hard conversations. They are absolutely necessary, and we will see you next week.